Welcome to another episode of the Commuters. And today we're not just going to be talking about a movie, we're going to be talking about a thing. And not just anything, the thing from John Carpenter in 1982.
Man, that intro smells about as bad as some of the I was about to say some of the the practical effects in this movie. And what I
But they're
mean by
not
that,
bad.
that's the point. They aren't bad. They look very good. I
It
don't
smells
get what
as
my
bad
own joke
as...
is. Okay?
No, I don't think any of us understand what your own joke is. But yeah, so The Thing came out in 1982. It is a remake from a film called The Thing from Another Planet. Came out in the 1950s, which is based off a book called Who
It's
Goes
called,
There?
yeah, Who Goes There? And then there's actually a new one that got reprinted called Frozen Hell.
Yes.
Okay.
There are many different versions, I would say, of this movie. I mean, there's technically three major versions, except there's one that came out in 2011 called The Thing, which is it's a prequel. It's not actually a remake.
Sure feels like one though, if anyone's ever seen it, because of how much
I
it.
haven't.
I can talk about that real brief before we go into it. It feels just like it. A lot of the things that happen in it are directly just ripped from the 1982 version. With the exception of they don't end up doing a certain very famous scene, and they do a different one that is like better. It's good, or I'm sorry, it's not better. It's good. It's different, but ultimately the film just feels like a product of being like, oh, we want to make money off of the thing again. And I think this wasn't too far off from when they made a video game too, so it kind of like, yeah.
So a little bit backstory on each of our experience with John Carpenter's The Thing. For me personally, this is actually my first time watching it. I'm a big fan of Halloween from John Carpenter, and I'm surprised I never sat down to watch this, but it's just one of those classics that I never got the chance to watch. So this is my first time experiencing it, and it was quite an experience. How about you guys? What is your kind of experience with The Thing?
It's one of the first like real horror movies I count myself having seen. Right up there with like Nightmare on Elm Street. I was never a real big fan of like the slasher fic stuff, so I'd always have to go to sci-fi to get my horror scratch. And The Thing was where it was at for me, because at the end of the day, I think what's really scary about The Thing is that it's the suspicion of it. You know, you absolutely don't know who it is, who it could be. Everyone's got a theory, but whether or not you're right or wrong, there's only one way to find out. And
Yeah,
that's,
that's something that we should get into when we get a little further in, is how good this antagonist is, despite how, it doesn't have anything besides what it is, if that makes sense. Like,
right.
Yeah.
It's the ultimate whodunit dinner party story, but cranked up to 11.
yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, that's a really good way of putting it. I never thought about comparing it to like a whodunit, but that really is what it is. Except it's less whodunit and more who is it?
Who ate it?
Who ate it? Oh no.
Yeah, so it's really a very I mean, it's a suspenseful movie from the get-go. It's all about, what's going on, what's happening. I think that the opening kind of is very striking to me anyway. It was like, I was like, why is this dude on a helicopter shooting a dog? Like, what is going on here? Why is he shooting that dog? Also, why does he have such bad aim and he can't hit the dog? But that's neither here nor there.
Yeah.
Also, it's probably hard to shoot a dog from a helicopter. But
While both are moving.
yes.
While also being really cold.
And then so immediately though, he lands the helicopter, and then like they start shooting and stuff blows up, and it's like right away off the get-go, you're like, okay, what just happened? Why is this happening? Like for me at first, I was like, am I supposed to know what's going on? I was kind of confused, and that was the point, because you weren't supposed to know what was going on. And I think they did that very well, just setting this up. They don't waste time. A thing to mention real quick is the film, it stars Kurt Russell, who I think is fantastic in this movie, and it stars Keith David,
Yeah,
who is great as well. And it's so weird seeing him so young, because I'm used to like just hearing him voice acting or seeing him like in TV shows and stuff later, like Community. But it's cool to see him. I think him and Kurt Russell actually have like a good kind of back and forth in this movie of like trying to take charge and make sure stuff gets done correctly under the circumstances.
Also, don't forget Walter Brimley. He's in here too.
Right,
You know,
right.
yeah, he's here too. You can't discredit his performance is really good too. Like this whole cast is pretty good. It's just you definitely have some people that ascend higher, but I definitely think that like I agree. The casting in this movie is fantastic. Then again, as anyone knows, John Carpenter seems to love Kurt Russell. He put him in like so many of his movies around that time. So I mean,
I
don't
think
know.
the '80s just loved Kurt Russell.
Yeah, dude.
No. I mean, how can you not love Kurt Russell? He has such an iconic voice. Like whenever I hear that guy talk, I feel like, yeah, I could have a beer with him.
Yeah, he's that kind of guy. He's got that kind of attitude that like you want to just hang out with him. I mean, every time I see him in a movie, I'm always like pretty happy. So, but his role as Mac is definitely like one of the ones I remember next to like when he plays Snake Plissken, and uh, the two of them are definitely like my favorite roles he's done.
Mhm.
But mostly because Mac is like for being just a pilot in this movie, he's like really level headed through the whole
Yeah.
thing.
Well, that's what I like about him is he's like this separates itself, I think, from a lot of horror movies in the sense that every decision they make in this movie is the best possible decision to make in this movie. And oftentimes in horror movies, especially in the 80s, characters are like, nah, we're going to split up and run into the woods so that way the killer can pick us off one by one. And every
Exactly.
decision they make in this movie is like, if I was in charge and, I thinking as critically as possible, those are the decisions you would make. Like you have to keep people together. You have to make sure that nobody's like on their own, and if they are, they have to be locked up, and you can't people need to be armed with blowtorches like everybody does pretty much, and then you have to come up with some kind of test, and the way the events play out is very logical but also very entertaining and suspenseful, and I think it's hard to hit that balance, right? Like a lot of time with movies, it's you sacrifice logic for spectacle or spectacle for logic, whatever, but this movie kind of like combines it, and it's executed in a very like competent and well done way. I do think out of the movies I've seen from Carpenter, I think this is his best directed one because I think the pacing is very well done.
Yeah,
That's something I wanted to talk about too. Is the tone that the pacing sets. It definitely doesn't move as fast and isn't as snappy as a lot of modern day horror or thriller movies. You can compare it to something like Knives Out that came out pretty recently, and I'd say both have incredibly different tones with how they like present new clues, new evidence, things happening in general. The Thing is much slower, but I think that really adds to it because it gives you time to build on the suspense. You're really, really sitting on that powder keg until it goes off.
powder keg goes off.
Oh yeah.
Well, yeah, I think like the reason that pacing works so well is because they mix like moments of downtime with moments of like, whoa, we've just revealed what's happening next. The next like you encounter the crew finds out someone else has been, turned into a thing, or the crew finds some evidence, and like you keep bouncing back and forth between the two. So it's like you're constantly in a movement to like see more of what's happening. It also helps that like there's a lot of characters in the movie, and you get a decent amount of time with like quite a few of them, and you get to kind of like like you can kind of create your own timeline too as you continue to watch the movie of like what's going on a character by character basis to like know what's happening to who. So like when certain characters are the thing, if you go back and rewatch, there's a chance you could actually like be like, all right, I have a timeline of when certain characters are no longer who they are, and like there's a lot of that, which I think is really, really smart.
They do a good job of making it like if this character ends up to be revealed as the Thing, you can track when they disappeared, and like then they came back later, and or they were just off screen for enough time that you're like, okay, this person could have been the Thing. And I think they do a good job of setting that up, where when you're tracking, like, if you want to, you could take out a piece of graph paper and write down the plot and be like, okay, this character, this character, this character, this character, we've been following this guy. This guy was out of the scene. This guy was out. Like, you could play it like a game of Clue, tracking your suspects. And you could be like, okay, who have we been following this whole time? Who is it more likely that they're not a Thing?
And that's so cool because it involves the audience and the experience. Everyone's trying to figure out who the Thing is, including you, the viewer, at the very moment that the rest of the characters are going around doing the exact same thing. So you can develop, when you're watching it the first time, theories as to who certain people are, and you're going to be immediately rewarded for that when it comes to, be that you're either right or you're wrong.
Which I think there's not enough like mystery horror going on. Like a lot of it is very much just like, oh, there's a monster, how do we stop it? It doesn't like ask questions, and this one's like, but who is it? And that sense of paranoia like not only influences the characters in the movie, but it like you as the viewer are like, I don't know who to, even though you can figure it out, like, you can see the clues, you're still going to be like, who is it? Who's next? Like, and the thing that sucks is if you like certain characters, you might not even know that they've turned already.
Yeah.
And that sense of paranoia is something that, like, I don't think any other horror movie has really pulled off very well.
Well, yeah, it's like that, whatever, the body snatcher type thing. It's an interesting kind of factor to compare this to the 1950s one, because in the 1950s one, there's no like body snatching, there's no replacing people. It's just one alien that they have to kill. That's called the Thing. And it's like a plant-based alien. It's very different. And apparently the book is actually more like the 1980s one, where it's like you don't know who this is, and they use the names from the characters in the book. So there's like a sense of adaptation there that I think Carpenter handles very well, and then mixes in this kind of suspense that building on-screen suspense can be a lot harder sometimes than building written suspense. Depending on the person, of course.
Yeah.
But kind of maintaining that throughout the movie, and then there's a few moments of release, but they're not jump scares usually. They're usually like, oh, this is the reveal, or this is that thing, this paid you off. Did you get it right? Didn't you get it right? And then there are a couple, I think there's like, one or two sort of jump scares, but it's more of like, okay, this is what they have to deal with. And then it's just like shit hits the fan. I think that describes a lot of this movie is just, shit hitting the fan, and then these guys making the best of it and trying to figure out the situation.
No doubt. I wanted to mention too that just very briefly, the Thing breaks kind of two cardinal rules of movie making if you think about it. The idea that as a rule you should show and not tell information that's presented to the audience, and that nothing should be ever done off screen. You kind of get that broken in the continuity with certain people having become the Thing off screen subtly, and then later on it's presented that they were infected sometime when, they weren't shown to be. It's like they never showed a scene where the monster went and got some characters. They were already monsters to begin with when they're outed. And I think that it's interesting that works in this, as does the idea that you know how they always say in horror movies, don't show the monster, at least till in the very end. They show the monster within the first 20 minutes with the dog thing in the kennel.
Yeah.
Like, they just write up and they show their hand from the get-go, and it doesn't stop being cool. And a lot of that's saved, too, with the phenomenal use of practical effects in this movie.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, there's still, some of them are really unsettling to this day. Maybe it's because, body horror is just such a unanimously, unsettling thing. But,
yeah, nobody likes to see gore, and...
Well, people enjoy seeing it in a way that we don't understand, in that people are like, oh, body horror, it's creepy and I love it, kind of
exactly.
But
I think the one that really got me was when Dr. Cooper was trying to resuscitate Norris, and he was going to defib him.
His chest splits open and his arms are off, and you're like, "What?" That might be one of the only jump scares in the movie too. Like
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
like one of those ones, and you're like, "What?" Because you're not ready for it at all.
No.
You want to know something wonky?
Mm.
The Jim Henson Puppet Company did a lot of work on the animatronics for The Thing.
Oh man.
From the mind that brought you Elmo and Sesame Street, The Thing.
I mean,
that's
yeah.
that scene in particular when like the head jumps off and it's like I know it's like kind of iconic.
Yeah.
And one other thing that I thought very like sold how disgusting it all is the sound effects. Like the sound design is so effective when it's like these like legs growing out of the head and stuff, and it's like and this bones crunching and gosh, it was kind of like getting under my skin, that stuff, and I'm like, oh man. And then they're like, the character's like, you gotta be shitting me. Like, what in the hell?
I think that's the thing that like made me like a lot of the characters in this movie a lot more than other horror movies is on top of being like smart, they're pretty like snappy. Like they there's a lot of things that are surprisingly funny in the dialogue, and yet, you know, in the situation that they're put against, the fact that they still have that kind of like dark humor amongst them is kind of nice.
Oh yeah. Like that line from Gary where he was, you know, they were doing the interrogation scene. I know you gentlemen have been through a lot, but when you find the time, I'd rather not spend the rest of this winter tied to this fucking couch. Like
God.
that man was sitting right next to an eldritch abomination, and he still had the wit about him to bring that out.
Man.
Like, oh, all right. So I do think we should talk about that scene in particular. The blood test scene is a really like iconic scene.
God.
It's just I think it's the perfect level of like something about the way it's shot is so good. Mostly because, you know, the blood test is iconic because obviously you're dealing with the fact that this is a test in order to figure out who is the current thing or if anyone that's currently in that room is. And the thing that's really cool is the way Carpenter shoots it is, if you'll notice, like it's the same angle every time Mac tests a new petri dish. So like you as the viewer end up seeing him in that position do it like 3 times, and you're conditioned to be like, when's the next one? And then you also have that moment where Mac straight out calls out a character for what they've done, and then you're thinking, oh, so that means you know, it's like you as the audience are like, maybe he's right, maybe this character could be the thing. So you're waiting for when he gets to that petri dish, and then they surprise you, and it turns out to be oh god, I'm forgetting the one character. He's the one that like we never see throughout the whole film for the most part. He turns into the thing there, and you know, you as the viewer were conditioned in like 3 other ways to not be scared by that jump. And that's probably the second one.
Well, that scene in particular for me, like this is my first time watching it. I was on the edge of my seat every single time he like was sticking the wire in the thing. I'm like, oh gosh, is it going to be this guy? Is it going to be this guy? Is it going to be this guy? And I did like how there was a little bit of bait and switch. Like they did kind of build you up to believe that I believe it was the general dude was the thing, the guy who had the keys to the blood box. But it wasn't
Gary.
him.
Gary.
Gary. They kind of led you to suspect him, and he wasn't one of them. And it was that one dude, like you said, who, you know, there wasn't really a whole lot leading you to suspect him, but no, he was it. And it kind of works more because we've seen Gary more, and it makes more sense because it's like, when would Gary had a time to become the thing? It's like this dude's been doing his own thing. That another use of that kind of bait and switch that I appreciated, like, was with McCready, early-ish, or halfway, maybe a third through. The dude finds his jacket in the snow, and you're like, dang. Like, to me, I was like, oh, he's one of them. That's confirmation, right? But it's like, no, it's kind of just like a little bit of a bait and switch there. One of the things did that to frame him, and I found that to be very effective of because he's our main character, but it's like, oh, is he the thing? Is that like it sows doubt in a very effective way, which I really appreciated.
There's something also really sobering when like Mac is the closest thing you get to a main character throughout the film, and you get that descent of you're like, is the same guy we're watching also not the guy we think he is anymore. Like,
Yeah,
it's
and it
something.
makes you watch closer.
Yeah, there's a lot of that, which is really, really good. Also, I like a detail. I don't think anyone brings it up, but Walter Brimley's character. Uh, I'm pretty sure, because we find out later he's the thing by like the last like stretch of the film, but like you kind of have an inkling that something's up with him. But the thing that immediately, like, it's funny because if you pay attention, they actually build up that he was one already. Because if you remember during the autopsy scene, he like puts the pencil that he used to move parts of the thing around in his mouth. He may not have he may have infected himself unwittingly.
Yeah.
Which is like, there's little things like that on a review, and you're like, oh, son of a bitch.
Wow, I didn't even catch that.
Yeah, he puts like the pencil, like the end, because he's like moving it around with that pencil he had, or pen, or whatever it was, and he'll later like he'll stick it in his mouth while he's like talking about something, or he's looking at something, and you're like, you as the viewer at the time won't think anything of it, but then you'll think later, maybe you'll come back to it and you'll be like, oh, knowing what we know, he literally just put like a bunch of cells from the thing in his body, and now he's screwed, which is something that like I don't think most people will catch on to, at least immediately on viewing, till you think about it. Which there's a lot of that. Also, the one thing, if you remember when the dog goes in the room with the silhouetted person, there's a lot of people who have theories about who that is. But the thing I like is Carpenter chose not to that's actually not one of the main cast members. That's someone entirely different that he put in there on purpose to sow deceit in the film.
Nice.
Like, think about that.
And I love too that that's both an actual plot element of something that happens and a little tidbit meant to, outside the realms of everything going on in the plot, skew the viewer's perception. Like we were saying, the thing threw MacReady's jacket out into the snow in order to try and frame him. Meanwhile, John Carpenter sneaking around the set doing all of these, interesting, fun little red herrings for us to find.
I mean, yeah, there's a lot of red herrings in the film. I'm trying to think. I feel like there was like something else to talk about. I don't know. We already touched on the practical effects.
There was the part with the guy with the beard. I can't remember his name, but I suspected him.
Windows?
I said wasn't. It was either Windows or Fuchs.
No, I think it was Fuchs, the bigger guy, the guy who had like the dogs.
Oh, yeah.
Oh no, that's Clark.
Clark. Okay, so I thought he was a thing for like because he was so close to the dogs. So I was like, oh, he must have been turned. But then when he's about to kill MacReady with like the scalpel, he's gonna attack him. I'm like, okay, this confirms it. And then he shoots him, and it's like, nah, dude was just he wasn't the thing. He was just a human. He was just paranoid. And I was like, that kind of hit me. And MacReady's like, or I think it's not Childs.
Yeah, Childs.
Oh.
He said
He called him out. He's like, dude, you just murdered him. It's like, like, dang. That kind of hit me like as being like an effective, once again, example of using how like powerful and horrific the situation is, and how terrifying this monster is, because it can be anyone, and that alone is enough to drive people to kill each other.
I mean, yeah, it's there's something about that paranoia that's like incredibly cool. It's just something that like I feel like paranoia is a better driver of fear than anything else, because like, not knowing something is a fear that like I think everyone can understand. Like having that unknown, that mystery, and knowing that mystery is directly influencing your survival is like, it's crazy. It's such a crazy thrill ride of emotions. The thing I remembered I wanted to also talk about was we were talking about effects and how like grotesque everything is, and we brought up the dogs. We also forgot to mention the fact that the thing, when it turns into a dog, just starts spewing goo and all this gross stuff, on top of like the way Carpenter goes about like showing how inhumane this thing is, how it's so alien to us that like it just folds open a dog's face. Like,
right, goo and tentacles, and it starts trying to eat another dog. How better of a motif to get us to hate this thing immediately than it killing not one but two dogs in the beginning of the movie?
Right. Well, and then like through effect, causing all those dogs to get killed.
Yeah, and that's why Clark went berserk in the first place. Was he was the camp's dog handler, so he
Yeah.
hated McCready for having to kill all the dogs.
I mean, but at the same time, it's like you know, McCready has the right of it. After what we just saw and what we've learned, that thing is not. That's an outlier, or not an outlier. That's a risk to the entire camp.
Yeah, he lets it go down, and that's kind of why he gets all hell-bent to try and kill the thing afterwards. But the dog handler without his dogs, that's a broken character.
Yeah, which does kind of play into why he was kind of a little bit more on edge.
Right.
I have a question for you guys. Do you think that, and this is like more of a backstory lore question, I don't know what you would call it, but the alien spaceship that crashed, do you think that the thing was the pilot, or do you think the thing killed the pilot and that's why it crashed?
I would go along the lines that it killed the pilot.
That's interesting.
I
think
the only
just
reason...
because, go ahead.
I'm sorry, Spencer. I keep cutting you off.
No, you're fine.
You sure?
Yeah.
All right. The only reason I think that is because it... I get the vibe that like there's more going on, because considering it's kind of like a shape-shifting monster, apparently, from what we know. And even when they... I'm also going by the 2011 version a little bit, because that does kind of like play up what it looked like in the ice when they found it. It still didn't look like a creature. It still looked like a bizarre, like, fleshy mess. So in that regard, I'm still like skeptical that it's actually like not the pilot, and it killed it instead, and this is what remained when it crash landed. But that's the only thing I can go with. Otherwise, like, I don't know. I don't think Carpenter really cared enough to evaluate, to like drop enough info on what exactly this creature's origins are.
It doesn't matter, and I think it kind of actually plays a little bit more into the ambiguity of it all. But there was the part where it's kind of building a spaceship, so maybe it was the alien. Who knows? I mean, like I said, it doesn't matter. I think it's kind of a fun thing to speculate on.
I mean, you say that, but I think it's pretty clear that the thing actually like gains intelligence as it grows.
This is true.
Like it seems to assimilate the intelligence of other people too, because like it knows things about like human interaction and all that after it infects people. So
yeah,
I mean, it makes you question like how capable, how smart is this thing? That's another part of that. Like fear is like, this thing's smart enough to build a spaceship.
Right.
No wonder it's eluding us by hiding in disguise amongst us.
I want to say too that I really respect the movie for somehow managing to make it so that it kills off characters pretty quickly towards the end of the story. Each death feels warranted. I didn't think there was one instance that a character died where it just seemed like a cop-out to tie up a story end or a cheap death.
I think there's like one.
I was gonna say, if I may, I think there's one example, and this might be kind of like maybe a little bit. I don't think it's more of a nitpick than anything, but yeah. The guy in the beginning with the glasses, he's the one who discovers McCready's jacket in the snow. The next time we see that guy, he's a burnt up corpse.
See, I love that though. I love that Fuchs, because he was the kind of the pseudo-intellectual alongside Dr. Blair. I loved that he figured out the fire implementation of the thing and probably had some kind of mental break and thought, nope, not me, not getting me, and just committed suicide, burning himself alive.
See, I guess I didn't really buy that, because he didn't seem very suicidal or crazy. Like, he seemed to be the more reasonable of all of them. Like, him and McCready were like the two that were kind of figuring stuff out together.
It's also possible that one of the thing people encountered him, and he's like, I'm just gonna burn myself alive before he gets me. Like,
he was alone.
You say that, but remember, he found that jacket, and you never know. You never know. There's a lot. Remember, there's a lot of like off-screen stuff happening. We don't fully know what was happening out there.
Yeah, there's a lot of ambiguity, which I do think can be like a positive because there, it gives you stuff to talk about and speculate on. Like, oh, maybe Blair or killed him because Blair saw him like figuring stuff out. Hey, for all we know, MacReady killed him because he didn't want to deal with him accusing MacReady of being a thing when MacReady knew he wasn't a thing. Like, that's and I do think there's room for speculation. We've seen MacReady he did kind of brush off murdering that one dude pretty quickly. Like, it didn't bother him too much. So there's maybe a kind of darkness there where it's like, dude, he's willing to do whatever it takes. So yeah, there is room for speculation, which can be a positive of that. But I do think that's the only, and maybe what was the death you were thinking of, Sky, when you were talking about?
I was thinking about Knowles, he's the one guy who runs off on his own at the very end of the movie. Like,
the cook.
Yeah, that one I was like, all right, that's one of those deaths where I'm like, that feels like a slasher film death. Like, he just ran off and disappeared, and you are to assume he is dead because he also was probably caught in the explosion that MacReady put off, he set off.
Yeah, I assumed that.
I'll give you that one. I kind of forgot about Knowles.
Yeah, that's the thing. He unfortunately Knowles is one of those few characters who, like, I definitely don't feel like got to do anything in the whole film, for the most part.
I wanted to touch on it before we leave. Basil, in talking about the ambiguity of the movie and certain questions being left unanswered, we of course have to talk about the ultimate ambiguity. Childs and MacReady at the end.
Mm-hmm.
Are either of them infected?
So, to me personally, I don't think either of them were affected, but I do think they were both going to die anyway. Like, I took it more of as a somber, like, we did our job and now we're going to die. Like, nobody's coming to their rescue. They have no supplies. They're in Antarctica, 1,000 miles from the sea. Like, they're just going to freeze to death, and that's the end. I did kind of get the vibe that they wanted to have that ambiguity there, like, maybe one of them is one of the things. But didn't they both have flame throwers at the end?
They did indeed. There's some details though. I can talk about that if you want. There's some details.
I've only seen it once, so remember that when you get into some of these.
Guy.
Oh, it's not spoiler. It's not like spoilers. This is like theory talk. Because
okay, go ahead.
All right, so there's a lot of things with the way it's shot. For one, Childs, notably, his breath is different. Like, he doesn't spew any breath.
He's not fogging up.
Yeah, he doesn't fog up when he talks, which some people have taken that as a cue that maybe he's a thing because he no longer regulates like breathing the same way or something along those lines. There's also the fact,
or because things are so sensitive to heat. I saw one thinking that perhaps they're just internally a lot cooler. So there was no condensation in the air. He wasn't warm enough to give off like fog breath.
Yeah, that's definitely like interesting and possible. There's also the case of the Molotov theory with the thing that MacReady gave him to drink. Some people think that might actually be like some form of either oil or something that's like flammable that people are not supposed to drink. And there's a theory that the reason he laughs at the end is because he's like, I got you. You fell for it. He knows it's a thing and he's gonna like do something about it. And that's another potential theory that like a lot of people have. There's even like someone made a timeline thing where they think they know where Childs turned to, but it's ambiguous to the point where that could be false, and Carpenter himself has never told us. So it's a mystery. Although there is material that follows afterward that has two different opinions on that, but I don't consider either of them fully canon, so I don't care.
I think it's one of those things that's infinitely more beautiful left up to the imagination.
Yeah, I agree. I think
I saw someone even make a good argument once that both Childs and MacReady were turned, and they just didn't realize it.
That's a freaky thing to consider. Like, imagine not knowing you yourself have turned already, and you're just oblivious to it. That's
right.
Especially with how hell-bent MacReady was on taking it out throughout the whole film. Like, fuck.
Yeah. That's I also thought it was really like. I mean, I think you said use the word beautiful. I think the ending, the way it kind of just cuts to the credits and has this like somber kind of score, and it's very like very very under. What's the word? It's not explosive and epic or whatever at the end. It's just like quietly ends the movie, and you're just like left to kind of think about that. I appreciate that. There's not like a booming orchestral score at the end. It's just like a nice, subtle kind of music, and then you're just kind of thinking about, dang, what just happened? Like who was what? And it encourages you to think about it, which I really appreciate. I mean, Sky, like with my taste in movies, like Nolan stuff or whatever. I like movies that kind of want you to think about the ending and encourage you to contemplate the movies, and then give you reasons to rewatch them. And
Yeah.
I did really appreciate this movie, and I'm definitely going to rewatch it at some point because I think there's a lot more to get out of it, out of a second viewing, and so on. But yeah, it was a very, very effective and kind of like, a lot of horror movies do have the kind of whatever bad end. They don't always have happy endings. But I like this ending where it's not necessarily a sad ending. If you want to just believe that they're both humans and they killed the thing and they achieved their mission, in that case, they're still probably just going to die. Like they're in the middle of nowhere. They have no means of contacting or transportation or anything. So that's pretty sad. Or one of them is a thing and the other one's going to have to kill him, or they're both things, in which case, it was
Well,
for nothing.
yep. Well, humanity's potentially screwed in that case. Because
Yeah,
if someone does come by,
yeah, I do think it's a very effective and one of the better like endings to a horror slash thriller slash sci-fi, whatever you want to call it, movie I've ever seen.
I mean, ambiguity is the entire movie, and even it ends on it as well. So I mean,
Oh yeah.
it's such an effective film, and that's why like I don't know.
Especially for when it was made too, because it breaks the 80s action trope of, main character prevails and gets away magically somehow, gets to, walk away from it all. We see that in Predator, his
Yeah,
entire squad gets wiped out, yet somehow Arnie's able to walk away just because he's the hero. That wasn't really the case in this. There was no one action hero. Could be Childs, could be McCready. A couple other people had some pretty awesome moments.
Yeah,
yeah. I mean, McCready did get his action one-liner when he killed the monster.
yeah, and
Oh yeah.
fuck you too.
Which was I enjoyed that. I mean, there were a few parts with like the flamethrowers and stuff that I was like, yeah, like you kind of get behind that. It definitely has that 80s actions like schlock, whatever you want to call it, in a good way
Hmm.
though, where it's like it's enjoyable and I appreciate it. That being said, about where was it going? There was something. Dang it, I lost my train of thought.
Did it have to do with the action? Did it have to do with the?
Oh yes. Okay, so something I respect this movie for a lot, and I don't think anyone would try this nowadays. Uh, so, and this might come off as kind of controversial. There was only male characters in this movie, and there was no romantic subplots, and it was super ultra mega focused on its story, and it didn't like worry about having to fulfill a quota or whatever or trying to market to demographic. Like it was like, no, this is our movie and we want to make our movie. And
Right,
not
because it's not like it was a white man movie about white men. There were, I want to say Windows wasn't white. We had two African American characters.
well, yeah,
Um,
and
We
I
have
mean,
people of
Child
all
was the other
ages.
main character.
yeah, and it made sense plot wise for there to not be any women on base because that would be awful. The
Yeah. I
if
mean,
something
also it's the
happened, in
80s.
the
Unfortunately, the 2011 version didn't care.
Was there a
right.
romantic subplot in it?
Not a romantic subplot, but there are like female characters. Also, the 2011 version is more just it's unfortunately a case of like the reason I can't recommend it is like while it talks about the Norwegian base. So the two guys on the chopper.
Yeah.
Yeah, it
It
talks about
shows where
those
they
guys.
come from.
Yeah, it talks about them. You actually figure out who those two guys are. You also find out what happened at that base where they actually found that like the one thing in the snow. Like, you pretty much get to see everything that happened over there to like create continuity. The thing is you don't need it. It feels very like contrived, and it just feels like it's filling in plot holes that you didn't need, or like plot points that you never really cared about. As more so you're just like, something went down here and now it's going to affect us. On the flip side, it also, like I said, it retreads ground. It does a lot of the same things. It has like a blood test fill in. It has the same. It actually, when they first burn a thing, the main character of that movie gives like McCready's exact same monologue, and it's really lame. On top of that, you don't have the cool like practical effects anymore. They had to do it. They did CG. And it looks pretty rough in some places. Like, there's so much about that movie that, like...
And I want to be clear. I don't think there's anything wrong if there's a female character in a movie. I just think that when you add something just for market purposes, it usually hurts the quality of the movie. And I feel like this movie, remember, is based off a book. And they wanted to... It's in the 80s, and realistically, this is kind of what you would expect at a tiny research station in the middle of Antarctica. Yeah. Very little amount of people, and it makes sense that they would be all a few specialized guys doing this stuff.
Yeah, I think like it works well to have an only male cast in this case. It's definitely like there's plenty of like fantastic female actors out there who have done an incredible job that like I'm not gonna be like, oh man, you did this thing, how could you do that?
I mean, you see people like Mary Elizabeth Winstead in Cloverfield Lane. She does a fantastic job in a kind of a similar claustrophobic type movie. And once again, this isn't really about quality of acting. It's just, to me, it's about, I feel like nowadays they want to focus test movies to death. And
yeah,
so,
the 80s was chock full of badass female heroines. I mean, you just look at the similar movie franchise of Alien with Sigourney Weaver.
Oh, yeah.
Let it never be said that... What?
Terminator 2?
Yeah, exactly. Sarah Connor. There was no need for another one, and the main character of The Thing is The Thing.
Exactly. And I just think I appreciate an artist who's just like, listen, I'm just making my movie.
Yeah.
Like there's no agenda. I'm just making my movie, dude. I want to make this book into the best movie it can be. And John Carpenter's like, I'm also gonna bring these insane practical effects to the table and make like the grossest looking junk in the world. And it's fun to watch. It's fun to watch somebody's head jump off their body and their stomach open up and bite off a guy's arms.
This movie took head crabs very literally, which it's oh man, I love the practical effects still. I mean, I'm always gonna think back to my favorite is actually I was about to say Norris, but it's not Norris. It's the other one, the one in the blood test scene. I like when his head splits open. I'm like, that's fucking crazy.
Right, he like Venus flytraps the guy.
Yeah, I was like, that's super cool. It's also like, there goes Windows.
Yeah, I liked Windows.
Did you guys notice too in that scene that they totally replace Windows' body when it's being thrashed around with like just a cloth doll, basically?
Yeah, but I mean that's one of those like hokey schlocky things that I think like I love about that scene.
Yeah, I point at it and I love it.
Yeah, there's just parts where you can kind of tell where you can see what they're doing with the practical effects or like how they're achieving it. Where you're like, okay, so they just used the string to pull this like slimy tentacle or whatever. But then there's parts where it's like a head and its legs grow out of it, and you're like, wow, that just looks really good.
Right.
What the hell? Oh, your practical effect, like, I feel like we didn't talk about, though. There's one in particular that, like, I always forget. No one brings it up because it's, like, a death that happens real fast. When Gary gets killed, when Blair comes up and, like, shoves his hands in his face.
Yeah,
or shoves his, like, finger, and you see him, like, claw into the flesh, and then it, like, slowly, like, as he drags him off, you can see it just, like, it's a fleshy mass of, like, just, that's, like, all attached to his face as he pulls him away. I don't think people give that enough credit. That's, like, unsettling. There's something really, like, to me about that.
Yeah, absolutely. It showed, too, how fast it happened. He was already infected on one touch,
Yeah,
It
like,
just started immediately assimilating into him.
oh, man, I just like this movie.
Yeah.
I just love the
Um,
thing.
do we want to kind of give our final thoughts about
Yeah,
it?
I've gushed all there is to gush.
Yeah.
All right. Who wants to go first?
Let's
I guess.
start off with Mr. Man, Sky.
Mr. Man. All right. I've said before, this is my favorite horror movie. There's not another one that I think really gets even close to it still, quality wise. It's just, there's something so special about it. And it says something when I'm such a devout fan that I do know the other things that are going on in the film, and I know about like the source, the other, not the source material. I know a little bit about the other stuff. That's how much I love this movie, that I was like willing to dig into other stuff like the game and the extra comics that they made and stuff like that. I love this movie, and as far as I can tell, I wish it was just this movie, because holy cow, did everything else that was made around it not be as good? But yeah, I love this movie. It's my favorite horror movie by far, and I would recommend it to anybody ever. It's that good.
That's pretty
Except
fair.
dogs. Not a good movie for
Yeah,
dogs.
except dogs. Don't recommend it to dogs.
Yeah. So for me, first time watching this movie, I was very much happy to see it lived up to a lot of the hype I've heard about. I enjoyed the entire time through. I second everything you said. I absolutely recommend it to anybody, and it's definitely worth owning. Yeah, it's a fantastic film, and I really liked it. And yeah, I mean, I guess there's not much more to add. We did just kind of gush about it for 45 minutes, but it's just fantastic, and you get great performances and fantastic suspense, and any kind of issues are very, very trivial or nitpicky. Like there's nothing in my head that dampens or really ruins the experience at all in the film.
Yeah.
Totally agree. Totally agree. I think that it's definitely one of the most consistent horror movies out there. Um, all the time, I find I'll watch a movie and love certain parts, but then, just kind of skip over others in my head because, oh, well, it's a lapse in logic, or, oh, they didn't really follow their own story here. Something I like to say is if you have to grocery list a movie or a TV show for me, then it's not good. It just has good parts. And The Thing is a good movie. You watch it all the way through.
Yeah.
Would definitely recommend you check it out if you haven't already.
Oh yeah. One other kind of thing, a little small topic to talk about at the end here. So Blumhouse is rebooting The Thing apparently, based off the recently expanded manuscript, like Frozen Hell. Now,
Okay.
I don't really have an issue with this because The Thing itself is a remake, so it's kind of like, whatever. Try it again if you want to. Try to take a different twist. Well, I'll judge the movie based on its merits. I just hope they don't try to connect it to the 1982 thing at all.
Yeah.
Don't.
Because there's the whole '80s fever going on, and
Yeah.
I think they said it's going to be a remake. Like, it's going to be another remake essentially, and it's going to be closer to the original novel since that extra like couple pages of the manuscript got revealed.
Yeah.
Which I can tell you, I don't think that's enough content to actually warrant a whole new movie. From what I've read, it literally is just extra information at the start of the film that like starts it a little differently. Or I'm sorry, the movie itself or the book.
What I think they should do is they should base it when the book came out, so in the 40s.
Oh,
Make the movie take
that'd
place.
be awesome.
Like you could really do something different there. If you make it take, so they're not going to make it take place in the 80s. So they're either going to do modern day or just go right to where the book was based. I think they should go right to where the book was based. And then you automatically are able to separate it from any other movie of The Thing, because it's a period piece, but also it's The Thing. And I think that you try to do a different twist on like the visuals and stuff, and I think you could do something unique, considering like this isn't a sequel or a prequel, and it's its own thing. And I hope that's what it is anyway. I hope it's its own thing that separates itself by not trying to mimic the 1980s thing.
yeah. I mean, I don't know. I'm really skeptical because I have a very low opinion of Blumhouse because like 75% of the horror movies they churn out I hate. Or actually,
Yeah.
it's more like 80% I hate. Like I just don't like them because it's like, let's put it this way: Blumhouse made Truth and Dare or Truth or Dare. What? Like I mean, they're
Oh,
making
man.
money. It's a business practice, but I'm also like, you're going to remake my favorite horror movie and probably ruin it. Like,
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, we'll see.
yeah,
The thing, John Carpenter's The Thing will always be there.
that's true. It's not going
You
away.
know,
It's not going to disappear.
if they do the Star Wars thing, and I mean that's the thing about not making it a sequel though, and not making it connected is like it can't really taint the original that way. You know, it's just
Yeah.
another take on an old story. So I don't know. It'll be interesting.
If
But I
they
think
do it cool, it'll be cool.
that is, Spencer, this is why we pay you the big bucks because you were just
Yep.
on point. But now
Absolutely.
I pose this question, Spencer: if they do it bad, will it be bad?
You know, it just might.
Oh dang!
Whoa,
But
Spencer,
anyway.
what a prophet.
I think that about does it for this episode of the Commuters. We're happy to be back, and yeah, we'll see you guys next time with another movie. No spoilers. We're just not really doing the recommendations at the end of the episodes now. We'll jump right in and we'll tell you who recommended things. Oh, also Sky recommended this movie if we didn't say it at the beginning of the episode.
Oh yeah, I
Thank you,
recommended it.
Sky.
Yeah.
But yeah, so
Ooh.
we'll be gone. Hopefully back within a couple of weeks, and keep enjoying the channel and the content we're making, the game stuff
Yeah.
we've been having fun with, and we got another subscriber, so we're at 21. So maybe we'll do a 21 subscriber special.
Gasp.
Anyways, the Commuters roll out.
Roll out. Are we Autobots?
Yes.
All right, cool. Later, people.